Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night and felt someone watching you? At 3 a.m. on New Year's Day, Rodney Mezer woke up to that exact nightmare. Standing before her wasn't a ghost, but a figure in a Batman mask, gripping a cold steel handgun. He bound her with zip ties. He shrouded her head with a pillowcase. He choked the breath out of her lungs while whispering in a distorted, sickening voice. But in the midst of that horror, Morgan realized something that made her blood freeze. This wasn't a stranger. The way he touched her hair, the sound of his breath whistling through his teeth. It was a frequency she had listened to for 15 years. The man torturing her was her husband. And the most insane part? 30 minutes later, that same man would untie her, weeping as he played the hero who saved her from the attacker. Harlem, Florida, 3 a.m., January 1st, 2021. While the rest of the world is immersed in celebrations, toasts, and New Year's cheers, time seems to stand still at this quiet residence. Rodney Mezer is fast asleep, clinging to the hope of a fresh start after a turbulent divorce. She has no idea that the darkness isn't waiting outside. The darkness is already inside her bedroom. A dark figure stands there. He isn't a common thief looking for cash. He wears the mask of a superhero, but his actions are those of a demon. Without a word of explanation, he lunges at her. A single gunshot echoes through the night, shattering the silence. Not to kill, but to execute any will to resist. Morgan is overpowered. He pins her down, a raw brutality radiating through every breath hissed between his teeth. He binds her wrists with zip ties, cheap hardware, yet as unyielding as iron shackles. A pillowcase is pulled over her head, and Morgan's world collapses into darkness. And then he begins to speak. He alters his voice into a deep, distorted growl, mimicking Batman. He whispers venomous words. You'll regret leaving him. You'll remember him until your last breath. He strangles her, releases her just long enough to gasp for air, then tightens his grip again. He is performing a ritual of humiliation more than a physical assault. But in the middle of this nightmare, Morgan realizes something that freezes her blood. That specific wheeze in his breath, the way his hands touch her hair with such possessiveness. It is a frequency she has heard for 15 years. This is no stranger. The man tormenting her is Rodney, the husband she just kicked out. In the darkness, Morgan understands that to survive, she must begin to play a psychological game with the very man who wants her dead. To understand the ghost of that New Year's Eve, we have to go back 15 years. Rodney Mezer wasn't born a killer. He was once a warm 17-year-old boy who gave Morgan surprise gifts and promises of eternal love. But beneath the facade of an ideal lover, Rodney secretly sowed the seeds of a terrifying power: control. He didn't love Morgan for who she was. He loved the feeling of possessing a vulnerable soul. Tragedy struck, serving as the perfect excuse for his cruelty. When his younger brother died of leukemia, followed by the loss of their firstborn child just 18 days after birth, Rodney didn't choose to grieve alongside his wife. Instead, he chose to turn pain into a power card. He began playing the victim to force Morgan into submission. He vented all his rage and every failure onto her shoulders, gaslighting her into believing, because I am hurting, my tyranny is justified. He turned their home into a psychological prison where Morgan became the guilt-ridden warden of her own captivity. But the true fuse of the tragedy wasn't grief, it was success. As Morgan rose to become a renowned architect, out-earning him and gaining citywide recognition, Rodney's fragile ego shattered. To a narcissist like Rodney, his wife's success wasn't a source of pride, it was an insult. He realized he could no longer control her through financial dependence. When the prey becomes strong and independent, the predator panics. He couldn't keep her through love, so he decided to keep her through destruction. When the divorce papers were finally laid on the table, Rodney knew his game of manipulation had failed, but he made a silent, malicious oath. If he couldn't have Morgan, no one in this world would. The performance of his fake cancer began, a desperate prelude to a bloody New Year's Eve. When physical violence and threats no longer worked, Rodney pulled out his most despicable card: pity. He knew Morgan's weakness was her oversized heart. Rodney spent hours creating fake diagnoses and emails from a non-existent clinic, claiming he had malignant cancer. He used the deaths of his brother and father as proof of a family curse. He wasn't begging for love, he was begging for the privilege of dying in his wife's arms. This is the pinnacle of manipulation, turning the victim into a villain if they dare to leave a dying husband. On New Year's Eve, Morgan finally insisted that Rodney move out. It was the moment her patience hit its limit, but it was also the moment Rodney's twisted plan went into motion. He didn't want to kill her instantly. He wanted more. He wanted her to need him. Rodney planned to pose as an intruder, attack her, and then immediately return as the rescuer. He wanted to become the savior in the eyes of the woman who had just rejected him. He wanted Morgan to believe that the world outside was a dangerous abyss, and that Rodney was the only lighthouse that could keep her safe. The New Year's Eve attack was a bloody theatrical performance. Rodney strangled her until she gasped, humiliated her behind the mask, and vanished like a ghost, only to reappear 30 minutes later, untying her with trembling hands. He cried with her, promising to protect her. But Rodney made one fatal mistake. The moment he touched her hair, Morgan recognized the truth. She no longer saw a superhero. She saw a demon playing the role of an angel. To survive, Morgan had to utter the most expensive lie of her life. "I still love you." Those words weren't for her husband. They were for the killer, meant to keep him from pulling the trigger on the final shot. Rodney thought he was a manipulative genius, but he was merely a clumsy criminal. At the scene, investigators found no signs of forced entry, the alarm never triggered, and the security cameras had been disabled by someone intimately familiar with the home's layout. On Rodney's computer, detectives discovered a chilling search history: how to strangle someone to unconsciousness without killing them, and how to mimic a voice. But the most damning evidence? Surveillance footage from a local hardware store showing Rodney purchasing the exact type of zip ties used to bind Morgan just 3 days before the attack. The Rescuer Act had reached its final curtain call. On August 4th, 2021, the court sentenced Rodney Mezer to 70 years in prison. He will spend at least 25 years behind bars before even being considered for parole. Justice was served on paper, but Morgan's battle was only beginning. The audience's satisfaction at seeing the perpetrator punished suddenly halts before a bitter truth. Rodney was in jail, but his ghost had yet to leave his ex-wife's mind. This is the darkest part of this case. Even with the evidence laid bare, Morgan went to the police station to defend Rodney. It is a devastating testament to the power of 15 years of psychological brainwashing. Rodney didn't just assault her physically. He broke her ability to perceive the truth. He had woven himself so deeply into the fabric of her identity that she felt guilty even as his victim. Physical wounds eventually heal, but the psychological shackles Rodney left behind could take a lifetime to unlock. Morgan Mezer's story is more than a criminal case. It is a warning for us all. Never mistake control for love, and never let someone else's pain become an excuse for them to hurt you. Morgan escaped, though the price was unimaginably high. Strange Frequency wants to leave you with this: always trust your intuition, because sometimes the most familiar breath is the most dangerous one. Thank you for watching. Keep your frequency tuned to the truth